Hello, hello. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. I'm excited that you are here. So before we start, I'll wait a couple of seconds for more people to join. Well, we can get started now. So before I continue with today, with what the Lord wants to talk to us about and share with us, just a little recap of the last video, night one. So with the first video, it was about Jonah and the big fish, how God called him to go to the city of Nineveh to warn the people with what they are doing that are, essentially harming them. And Jonah was like, nope, I'm not gonna go. And he disobeyed. He went like the opposite way than what God told him to go. So long story short, God turned him back around. Jonah prayed, asked for forgiveness for his disobedience and for getting other people, like harming other people because of his actions with the storm and the ship. And at the end of it all, Jonah was able to preach the word of God, and the whole city, even the king, repented for their wickedness, and then they turned back to God. But in today's video, in night two, it's a continuance of that video regarding, God calling back his people. So, with him wanting to help and guide them to turn them back to where he has called them to be. For us to just turn back to him, even with our flaws, our imperfections, just as we are, to just turn back to him, because essentially he's going to be the one to help us get through what, the challenges and what we're facing. And, he's a great God for that. So in this video, we will talk about the importance of prayer. So regarding the spiritual portals that our consequences may have given access to the enemy to continue to attack us and the next generations that are to come. So before, I understood about the portals and the realm within the spirits of the consequences of our actions, I didn't understand anything. I just believed whatever I saw around me was enough for me to understand, okay, well, I did this mistake. I'm going to, of course, ask for forgiveness. But through that, God taught me that through prayer, it's important to go deeper so that we don't give any legal rights to the enemy to attack our children and the generations that are to come next. So with that, I do want to share about the woman that I learned this from. It was spirit led. The Holy Spirit led me to her during, I think, literally 2 years ago. I think by this month, that's when God showed me her, and through her, I was able to expand in prayer. I was able to receive more knowledge within the spirit, what our human eyes can't see or what we can't understand unless God reveals it to us. So her name is Dr. Ines Furume. I'll leave the link in the description box after the video, but I highly recommend her. She's a woman of God. She's awesome. She's very real with, loves God and is spirit led as well. But if anyone wants to, pray deeper, wants to understand more, certain patterns, generational curses and things that can really just break things with us and our children and the next generations, I highly recommend her. She's great. I learned so much from her. And even in the last season I was in, God it told me, hey, you got to go do this prayer challenge with her. And every single time the prayer challenges end, it's I'm amazed, because I'm just I feel just so renewed, and there's so much more than I understand now than I did before. And it was through the power of prayer, the importance of prayer. So, with that being said, so the importance of prayer. So, as humans, we tend to focus what's around us, right? We tend to focus on the problems, and then it's very distracting. At times, I focus on what's going on around me, but then I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm not. There's no point of me complaining about it or thinking about it without finding a solution. And the best thing that I do that helps me is prayer. Like, God, this is happening today. I feel this way. It's bothering me. There's nothing I can do now but to pray to you. And then going deeper into that, and then He reveals to me like what is going on. Like, maybe right now I don't have an example, but I'm sure when the time comes, I'll share that example. Um, but with that, per se, like, yes. So focusing back, like, we just focus on what we see, but there's so much that happens in the spirit realm that, it's a good thing that our human eyes can't see what exactly is going on, because I think it would be a bit frightening to see so much going on with the real battles that happen behind the scenes. But through that, it's just asking God, God, I'm going through this, or God, I'm facing this, I don't understand. Why do I keep on doing something that is hurting me and is ending in the same result? What is going on? So, through that example, now the Holy Spirit reminded me of an example, was that um, through my family, there's certain patterns that was continuing from my mom, my grandma, and so forth, with both sides of my parents, my family, that I couldn't understand. Why is this happening? Why am I going through this, such a similar story that from my mom or my grandma, my great grandma? And that's when, going deeper into prayer, God revealed to me the certain patterns that the enemy kept on doing in our family, per se, poverty, debt, anger, even with relationships, or, just the way of thinking and acting. Those, all of those things are patterns that was done before. So if I didn't seek God or ask Him that, then I wouldn't have known. So there's a verse that's very important to just remember, because things happen all the time and we can't control it. So it's always important to say, hey, I don't understand what's going on. Let me just ask God. Because in His word in the book of Matthew, chapter 7, verse 7 and 8 says, ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks it will be opened. So with this part, it's just ask God anything. Ask Him anything. You have any doubts? You want to know anything? Ask Him. Like just to go to Him is awesome, because He will respond, and when He does, it's like, oh, that's why. I've had, even today, I have those moments so much, and it's great because then I get to understand more than what I didn't before. So, with that being said, let's begin today, night 2. So like I said, we're going to uh, look more into the importance of prayer, the deeper prayer. And today we're going to be in the 2nd of Samuel, chapter 13, verse 1 to 22. I'm not going to read every single verse, but I'm just going to read through it along. So if you guys, have your Bible, or you guys want to read along in a slower pace, you guys can know that it's 2nd of Samuel, chapter 13, verse 1 through 22. But before I read that chapter, I will briefly explain about the consequences of King David. This story is, I don't know if you may know it, but it's pretty well known about King David and Bathsheba. um, but it's just, King David, man of war, great man of war, God had given him victory after victory after victory. God gave him riches, everything, right? Because David always seeked God's heart, and God saw that. God chose him to be the king of Israel. And through that, there was, so let's go to, that's in chapter 11. I'm not going to read everything, but if you guys want to read it in your own time, feel more than welcome to. But it starts in chapter 11 when David, this was around springtime. So David just went out to his balcony, was looking around, and at that time, people would, I guess, people would take baths in the rooftops. I don't know. So one day, David was just looking out, and then he sees Bathsheba, doing what she was doing, and he saw her. He's like, who is that woman? Bring her to me. So his servants went to go get her, and they did what they did in their private time. But the thing was that Bathsheba was married. She was married, and her husband was actually fighting with the Ammonites, with David's army. So he was part of David's army, but David didn't care. He didn't care. So they kept seeing each other. I would assume, because then shortly after she becomes pregnant. But David was doing this in secret. Maybe sure his servants knew, but David was like, you know what? I want her to be mine. I want her husband. His name is Uriah. I may be saying it wrong, but I need him out the picture. So what does he do? He sends a letter to like the captain of his army saying, I want you to put Uriah in front of the battlefield. Where it's like the most terrifying, gruesome part of the whole army. Put him there. Because his plan was for him, to no longer exist so that he can have Bathsheba. So the captain obeyed his orders, sent Uriah to the front of the line, and shortly after, he gets attacked, and that's the end of Uriah. So after that, then David was able to marry Bathsheba. But so many things were going on in that period of time that was just against God and essentially was wicked. I mean, I don't know. It was just done very wrong at that time, but hey, we all make mistakes. But after that, the Lord sends a man named, it should be here, Nathan. And basically, Nathan just said, hey, God told me what you did, this is what you've done, and there's consequences to your actions. So David in chapter 12, verse 13, it says, so David said to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. And Nathan said to David, the Lord also has put away your sin. You shall not die. So God forgave him for what he had done because he acknowledged the wrong that he did, right? But I honestly don't know at that time if David prayed deeper for those actions or that pattern to not continue to his family, the next generation, because years passed by, and this is where we enter in chapter 13. Years went by, and he had a son and a daughter. He had many sons and daughters. He had many wives. Okay, so that's why I'm just like, was it really necessary to take Uriah out of the picture when you have all these wives? I don't know. But in chapter 13, it shares how in chapter 13, there's per se 3, 4, 5 characters. Two of them is David's son. One is named is Absalom, and the other one is named Amnon. And the third person is Tamar. And I'll just go along with the other two that are going to be part of the chapter. But in chapter 13, verse 1, it says, After this, Absalom, the son of David, had a lovely sister whose name was Tamar. And Amnon, the son of David, loved her. So, like I said, David had many wives. All the siblings had the same dad but different moms. So Absalom and Tamar, same mom, same dad. Amnon had the same dad but different mom. So in a way, they are siblings but just different moms. But Amnon, so this is verse 2. Amnon was so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick. So he fell in love with his own sister to the point where what do we all do when we are in love, right? We can't stop thinking about the person. We get butterflies or we start eating less because we're just so excited. But this type of sick was like Amnon was literally like very skinny. Like he stopped eating. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Like he just became sick. And what did David do? David saw Bathsheba and he had to have her. He had to have her. So whatever action that David did that day, it transferred to his children, Amnon. Why? Because that deep prayer that probably David didn't do, that essentially would have broken that generational pattern or curse, it continued on to Amnon. So that's why it's important of prayer to go deeper so our actions don't have consequences on our children. At times we think about just the moment and sure, great. We enjoy that moment or whatever decision that we make, it's fun or whatever. But essentially that action can be transferred to our children. And then per se, when we have our children, they act a certain way and we don't want that. But it's like, what did per se we do or our past generations do for that to continue? It's a very good thought to have, I guess, moving on forward. But continuing on, so in verse 3, it says, But Amnon had a friend whose name was Jonadab. That's the other character of this story, Jonadab. Essentially, they were cousins because it says that they were friends, but Jonadab was the son of the king's brother. So they were cousins, right? but But then Jonadab saw Amnon, like, what's wrong with you? What's going on? And Amnon, imagine, look, this is what he says. Amnon says in verse 4, I love Tamar, my brother Absalom's sister. At times, we try to cover up the truth by putting a little white lie there. Because he easily could have said, I love Tamar, my sister, right? Because if Absalom is his brother, Tamar's his sister. But he tried to be like, oh, I fell in love with Absalom's sister. No, that's your sister. you know? But Jonadab, his friend, gave him a very tricky idea. It goes to verse 5. He says he advised Amnon. He told him, pretend you're really sick so that the king, your father, King David, can come see you and tell him that you want her to come cook for you. And since you're sick and you can't move, tell him that you want Tamar, your sister, to feed you and feed you. And Amnon did just exactly what Jonadab advised him to. King David came, saw him very sick. He felt bad for his son. He listened to what Amnon asked him about his sister. So in verse 7, it says, And David sent home to Tamar, saying, Now go to your brother Amnon's house and prepare food for him. Verse 8, So Tamar went to her brother Amnon's house, and he was lying down. Then she took flour, made cakes, and once she was done cooking, he told his servants to get out of the room so he can purposely have her just all to himself. And then once everybody came out, came out of the room, closed the door. Then that's when Amnon told her, in verse 10, then Amnon said to Tamar, bring the food into the bedroom, that I may eat from your hand. And, Tamar didn't know what was going on. She was just assisting her brother, being obedient to her father, King David. And, she just said, okay, I'm going to go help my brother. I'm going to cook for him. And now that he asked him, can you feed me? And she said, okay. So she got the food and brought it to him. That's when, everything happens. And I don't know if this may be any type of trigger to anyone. I understand, but then he tells her, come, do this with me. And in verse 12 it says, but she answered him, no, my brother, do not force me, for no such thing should be done in Israel. Do not do this disgraceful thing, because essentially it would bring shame to her. The way that she would lose her virginity, which was something very pure, and it still is, to lose it that way would be shameful to her, and the shame that would bring upon her family because of that act, especially they were siblings, so even worse. But she just kept on saying, no, please don't do this. But he, with his sickness and that urgency, he didn't listen to her. He didn't care because he was just thinking about what he wanted. Same thing with King David. He didn't care if Bathsheba's husband died, because he just wanted her for her. So that pattern continued on with Amnon. He didn't care what his sister said. He didn't care about the consequences. He just wanted what he wanted. And sadly, as at the end, he did get his way because he was stronger than her, and everything happened. But the thing was that once he was finished with her, he was like, okay, I'm done. You can get out of here. I'm like, the shame that was brought upon her, and after the deed was done, for it just to mean nothing. Oh gosh, oh gosh. But going to verse 15 all the way to 22. I'll just briefly share what it says. It's just that then after Absalom, Tamar's brother, found out what happened, he was furious. Who wouldn't be furious? He was furious, and King David later found out that, what Amnon did to be sneaky, to bring her, and it was just a wicked plot. He found out, and he was very upset as well. Because in verse 21 it says, but when King David heard all of these things, he was very angry. And, through that, it's like, I wonder, through that action, with what King David felt, he felt very angry. I wonder if he paused for a moment and thought to himself, this is something that I did before. This is very similar to what I did. I got Bathsheba. I didn't care if she was married. I sent him to the front of the line for him to be unalive, just to have her. And now him seeing how his child, his Amnon, his son, did something very similar. I wonder if he stopped to think that through his actions, his past actions, was a pattern and an open spiritual portal for his son Amnon to continue what he did. It goes on, but at the end of it all, if anybody wants to know, Amnon is unalived by Absalom, because it gets like the Bible gets, like they say, juicy. There's a lot of good things, but a lot of things to learn as well. But with that being said, let's see. Okay, so in conclusion, it's okay. We make mistakes. It happens. We're not perfect, nor should our imperfection be an excuse to continue those mistakes. but to understand that we're going to make mistakes, but to also have in our mind that through this mistake, is it going to affect my children? Is it going to affect those I love? Do I want this same mistake to continue on with my family? If I don't want that, what can I do? Right? So it's important to pray to God to close any spiritual doors and any plots against us, our children, and the generations that are to come that the enemy may have legal rights to. But one thing when I was learning about this, and like, how can the enemy have legal rights if I already prayed to God, if I already repented, if he already forgave me? Through our actions, like I said, yes, he forgives us, but that generational pattern may still be there if we don't know exactly how to pray against it and bring it to God so that he can like just break it off so it won't continue on to our children or the generations that are to come. And it won't give the enemy any right to say, hey, Lord, hey, God, this person did this and this. They're still continuing, it's still there. So I still have some opportunity to keep attacking this family. And one of the things that when I was learning about this, God revealed to me, like, for example, there's many things, but I'll give this as an example. What comes to mind is anger and frustration. Um, that's something that has been in my family, my mom's side, my dad's side, both of my grandmas, and who knows for how long. And I don't know who exactly may have started that, but that pattern kept continuing and continuing and continuing until God allowed me to acknowledge, like, hey, this is not normal. This is not right. Yes, we have emotions. Yes, our emotions are valid, but how am I going to go on to deal with this problem? Am I going to continue with the same reaction, or am I going to choose to respond differently in a good way, in a healthy way? And at first, I didn't understand because that was something that I struggled with. I would get frustrated easily, especially living in a city where there's so much traffic. It's just so easy to just be like, ugh. But it was something that through those prayers, through seeking his answer, he revealed to me that this is something that has been going on in my family for generations. So that's why it would be easy for me to just react in anger, or, just react in a certain way that was just not healthy. And when I got to understand that, it made so much sense as to why I would react the way that I would react, and how in God, in Jesus, I with through prayer, I would be able to be the one to say, enough is enough. It ends with me. Because I don't want my consequences, my actions to affect my son or my future children that are still yet to come. Like, I don't want my actions to continue with my children. Like, I don't want that generational pattern, curse, bondage, chain to continue with my family. So I got to do something about it now. I got to pray about it. I got to pray deeper about it. I got to, if God willing, if he leads me to it, we'll talk about like the second heaven, where there's so many things going on there within the spirit realm. But certain things that just happen within the spirit that we can't see or we can't understand yet until we ask God to reveal it to us. So one thing for sure, I encourage you to ask God, what are the patterns that I'm doing that were passed on to me that I was not even aware of, that is hurting me, that is hurting my family, that will hurt my family that is to come, right? And it's why at times it's important to not just think about ourselves, but to think about the generations that are going to come after us. What type of family do we want them to grow up with? the like actions, mentality, the way that we deal with emotions, like so on and so forth. Like, what do we want them to really have, right? And the first thing for sure is having God in the center. It's so important. It's awesome. I think it's awesome because I've seen like night and day how beautiful it is to have God in the center of our lives and in our family and our households. Um, so I just encourage you to ask God, God, what are the patterns that I'm doing that my mom did, my grandma did, that led them to the same results, to the same pain, to the same, per se, addictions or anger, whatever it may be in relationships, failed marriages, whatever it may be, ask God and He will reveal it to you. And once He reveals it to you, ask Him, tell Him, God, guide me. How can I pray about this? How can I go deeper into this prayer for you to be the one to break this off so that my children don't go through this? So that my children that are going to be born later don't have to go through this? Or how can I pray about this so that whatever once was, breaking our family, causing poverty, causing debt, whatever it may be, God help me to pray deeper. Not just, of course, to be grateful that God, thank you for this day. Thank you for getting me home safe and sound. Thank you for my health. Yes, this is very important. That's why it's important to spend that time with God, ask Him, pray to Him, and He will reveal it to you. And that's awesome. So, and of course, all in Jesus' name, and also, of course, for the Lord to break off old patterns that essentially have hurt our families, and for us to say enough is enough. Like stand our ground and say, you know what, I don't want my family to go through debt no more. I don't want my family to go through divorce no more. I don't want my family to go through whatever situation that you see or the Lord reveals to you the patterns, that for it to end. It doesn't have to continue that way. And, it just doesn't have to. So through all of this, I hope that I explained it well. But yes, our actions do have consequences. And yes, asking for forgiveness, yes, acknowledging our wrongs is very important. But to dig deeper in prayer is so important as well. So that, like I said, God can reveal to you what has been hurting you in the past generations so it can all end. And it ends with you. Okay? So I thank you so much for your time, guys. Thank you, those who are here watching. And thank you for those that will watch later. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this night too. So I see you guys on the next video. And I hope you have a great rest of your night. Bye.